Thanks very much. Greetings from the Granite State. Longing to be back in Iowa. We'll be back soon. I started this journey about a year and a half ago. I'm the first openly gay candidate to ever run for President of the United States. I'm a longtime political consultant. I've been in the business a long time, having worked on 9 presidential campaigns. But I'm concerned about the direction of the country and the current leadership and also the Republican Party. And I want to bring a message of optimism, American spirit, and take a new direction than the current administration. Well, you know, it's interesting. Right after he was sworn in as our new National Party Chair, Reince Priebus had a meeting with me in his offices in Washington, D.C., along with the Vice Chair and the other Republican National Committee and also the Chief of Staff. And I think part of their interest in me is that I have been the only presidential candidate reaching out for younger people. I've spent a lot of time, at Iowa, Iowa State, Drake. I've probably spoken at, 30 or 35 universities and colleges around the country, many, several times each, to send a message, that the Republican Party, that the Fred Karger vision is one that welcomes younger people, that isn't hung up on the social issues, that brings people in because we're concerned about smaller government and more jobs and opportunity. And I think that's an important message for younger people. And I really enjoy younger people. I've even advocated, the 28th Amendment to the Constitution to lower the voting age to 16 or 17 to empower our youth and make them better voters. And I've spent a lot of time and will continue to bring younger people not just into the Republican Party, but into the political process in general.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're seeing now in colleges, in polling, and just, in my own findings and many others, college students, high school students are not concerned about gay marriage. They're not concerned about abortion. They're much more concerned about the impactful issues such as jobs, the economy, education reform, pulling out and getting out of Afghanistan and Iraq. And these are the issues that seem to be motivating younger voters. So the Republican Party is making a fatal error, and most of the Republicans running for president, my fellow candidates, in dwelling on these issues. They're backwards, they're un-American, I think. They're hurting not only our country, but the Republican Party. We need to put those issues aside and move forward. Well, thanks. I spent a lot of time on Ronald Reagan's political team and his operation, and I learned an awful lot from him. And, one of the great takeaways was his unending optimism. He was, he took the presidency in 1981 at a time not only of dire financial straits we're in, with a recession, with high unemployment, with 10.5% inflation, and then the morale of the country was devastated because of our Iranian hostage situation. Over 400 days of American embassy being taken over in Iran and ridicule. So he brought this great spirit and optimism to the country, and that's what I want to do, because he helped through his motivation and some legislation that he got passed using, his great friendship with Tip O'Neill, the Democrat Speaker of the House, to turn the country around. But it was mostly his never-ending optimism, his spirit, his can-do attitude that helped lift the country out of the malaise that we were feeling 30 years ago. So a Karger administration wants to focus on that, working with the Democrats very closely to forge an alliance to get things done, and the Republicans in Congress. And, someone who supported Hillary Clinton 4 years ago as a maxed-out donor, supported many Democrats throughout my political career and my career post-retirement. And so I think that's important, that somebody unique like Fred Karger has the ability to get along with both sides to get our country moving again.
Excellent. And so about taxes, should the U.S. raise taxes?
Well, we're at a time in our history where we need to do some dramatic steps. We need to sacrifice. And with me and in my economic proposals that I put forward so far in my grand plan I'll be releasing soon, everything needs to be on the table. The politicians in Washington, D.C., and 536 of them, if you count the president, are focused on one thing and one thing alone. It's getting reelected or moving up. It's their next election period. They have not put the country first. Fred Karger wants to put the country first. You know, I've never run for office. I run a business. I've been in politics my whole life, and I want to put the nation first. So, you know, if we need to increase our revenue instead of just cutting spending, instead of just cutting taxes and increasing spending, everything needs to be up for discussion. We can no longer continue along this road. And Obama's done it again. You know, this $447 billion proposal, which is just kind of the centerpiece of his campaign. He's only selling it in states like Iowa and, Ohio and Virginia, the swing states for him, and important early states. You know, it's not the route to this. It's creating more of a deficit, and it's not a long-term fix. You know, it's basic common sense right now for people. You know, how many times in the summer do you go into a movie theater or an airport or a shopping mall and it's freezing and you're seeing people putting on sweaters, or you're in the winter, you go into those same public buildings and you're boiling. You know, let's just set those thermostats down a little lower in the winter and up a little higher in the summer. Let's not waste all this fuel. Let's be more of a fitness-conscious country. Let's walk someplace. Let's ride bikes. Let's save on energy. Let's get scooters. Let's give some incentives and tax credits for, sort of smaller vehicles like scooters, like Segways, things like that people can do, but particularly on energy efficient. To be energy efficient, I grew up with two parents who were both children in the Depression and lived through World War II. I would get screamed at if I didn't turn the lights off when I left the room. So little things like that, multiplied by 307 million people, can have a dramatic impact on energy conservation today. Well, it is another dictatorship. We're seeing the Arab Spring into the Arab summer and now fall when dictators are falling. And it is a brutal dictatorship. It is a threat to the United States. It's a threat to our biggest ally in the Middle East, Israel. And I think we need to do what we've done in some of these other situations. We need to watch it very closely, but I assume, and of course I'm not privy to the intelligence briefings and things, that our CIA is very active over there trying to make a change in leadership, because it should be a democracy. Not every country is ready for that. We're seeing what happens in Egypt. It's roll of the dice. The administration, I think, has really had its eye off the ball there. Who knows what's going to happen there with the military leadership? Are they going to give up control? It's unlikely, but similar in Libya. But Assad needs to go. It's his father, and it was horrendous, and the brutality and the political imprisonments and torture and murders are no longer acceptable, and never have been. But the line in the sand is drawn, and we need to accelerate the removal of Assad if we can. And I assume we're working on that. Well, I've just visited the Middle East just a few months ago and met with a lot of the leadership in Israel. I have always and continue to support a two-state solution with a Palestinian state, but it can't be done the way the Palestinians are trying through their end run at the United Nations. They say one thing publicly and another privately. We've seen there's a lack of trust there, but if they will sit down and negotiate a settlement, Israel has always been ready to do that. So let's let our leadership, President Obama, Secretary Clinton, let's help facilitate these talks. They should be ongoing. My political hero, James Baker, went to Iraq 29 times, I think, to try and hammer out a solution there. I think it's important that this negotiations continue always. Even with countries that we're fighting, if we can do that, it's just proven successful. James Baker was a political consultant. He was, a deal maker, and that's what I think we need to do. the United States has a tremendous amount of influence all over the world, and we need to utilize that to bring peace at last to the Middle East. You know, I liked Bill Clinton. I liked his presidency. He was more of a moderate. He tended to get along with some Republicans, not all, but I particularly liked Hillary Clinton. You know, I'd met her several times. I think she was would have been an excellent president. And I was not happy, quite frankly, with the Republican field 4 years ago. So I was a maxed out donor to her, and I'm proud of that. And I think that, you know, I am indicative of where the American public is right now. You know, they're not as partisan as they were 20 or 30 years ago. You know, I think, you know, there's some great prospects out there. You know, I like John Huntsman. He's got an airplane. I think that's good. You know, there's a tremendous number of great Republicans. I'm excited about the prospect. I'd like to break some new ground. And I think Condoleezza Rice is somebody I've always been very intrigued by. The only problem is she's a California voter, as am I, and you know, constitutionally that's illegal, but you know, there are ways around that. But she certainly has a breadth of foreign policy experience. And so there are a tremendous number of candidates. I've not really started looking too much, but I think there's some great people out there that I think would be an excellent complement to a Karger administration. Well, you know, he's passed some good legislation on LGBT issues. He gets about a C, I think. He's done a pretty good job there. You know, he's brought some innovative ideas to government. I think he's you know, shown a little softer, gentler feel for the rest of the world that were pretty up in arms over the Bush administration. He might have taken a little too far, but he's trying to be a conciliator. You know, he's given hope to a lot of people. As the first African-American president, I mean, it's just hugely significant, you know, what that message sends to his community and to the rest of the world. And I think, you know, that's important. But, you know, he's failed in a lot of areas. He's been a bust. I thought he was going to be another Reagan. You know, here's this guy who is so charismatic, and what a wonderful speaker and motivator. Talk about someone who energized and brought younger people into politics. You know, he's the king. Unsurpassed. Look what he did in Iowa. I mean, phenomenal. Well, something happened the day he got elected. Mm-hmm. That fighter, that spirit of Barack Obama was kind of lid was put on it, and we saw it even in the formation of his inaugural. And I was very disappointed. He just seemed to buckle too quickly. You know, if you're president of the United States, I don't care if both houses are, you know, of a different party. And when he came in, he had both houses as Democratic. But, you know, he was trying too hard to be liked. And you can't do that. You need to be, you know, you need to have your poll numbers up to get things done. But you also need to be tough. You need to be a leader. And he's been lacking on that. So he's been a disappointment. Well, actually, you know, the big black eye that Reagan had, and it was big, and his conduct as president was shameful on HIV and AIDS, you know, which was a new disease. It was discovered during his administration and was, of course, you know, its most deadly during his administration, and they remained silent until their good friend Rock Hudson contracted AIDS and passed away. But overall, you know, he was not a major social conservative in certainly on LGBT rights. As a matter of fact, and you know, my memoirs are out now. I got to give a plug for those. Fred Who, that's on Amazon on Kindle, and it's also on Nook and iBooks. And I talk about the heroic action of Ronald Reagan. It was something I was very involved in 1978. This is the time between he ran for president against Ford and when he won in 1980. So he's still running for president, basically. He very courageously came out against California, then called Proposition 6, the Briggs Initiative, awful Republican state senator, which would have banned gay, lesbian teachers, employees in our California school system. And it was ahead, very popular, as was happening in the late 70s. It was ahead 2-1 in the polls. Well, Reagan, after an effort I started to make it bipartisan, to bring Republican opposition to this hateful initiative, a meeting took place, not with me, but with the two campaign managers, set up by Pete Hannaford, his right-hand guy who was gay but not out at the time, set this meeting up. We were told that Reagan would not come out against the initiative, but after David Mixer and Peter Scott presented their case to him, he opposed the initiative. And that was such a huge turn of events for Proposition 6. If you've seen the movie Milk, it's depicted in there. And then what happened was it went down to defeat 2-1. And it ended this gay bashing that Anita Bryant and some others were doing in the 70s. It just kind of ended it cold. So, he stuck his neck out while running for president of the United States to support a very hateful anti-gay initiative. Now, as president, not so good. And, of course, the 80s were a horrific time because as our civil rights started to move ahead in the 70s, when HIV/AIDS came around, the door was slammed because people were so afraid. They thought, they could catch HIV/AIDS by shaking someone's hand or kissing or using the silverware. It was a very terrifying time. And so people were so afraid of gay people. And also I've got to point out, and I didn't even remember this, but some friends who were in an organization called ACT UP, which was the radical great group that really helped speed up the process and get people and government funding to tackle this disease and take away the stigma. Well, they spent an inordinate amount of time just trying to get the New York Times to print the word AIDS. They refused. And this is the most liberal paper, progressive paper in the nation, particularly in the 80s, and they refused to do it. So, it was a very different time. We've evolved on that tremendously. We know that was a regret of the administration. Certainly, the Reagans have a lot of gay friends and always have, and it was a shameful experience. But I think overall, I contend that Ronald Reagan would support gay marriage to this day. I think he would. He was a caring person, a lot of gay friends, could care less, Hollywood for a long time, and I think, he would be a great ally. Well, thank you. We have a website called letfredin.com. We have petitions from time to time directed to the organizers. There's a debate coming up on Tuesday in New Hampshire, and I have apparently qualified again. I was told, you have to be at 2% in the national poll. I'm saying, well, let me send you the Harris Interactive National Poll, which the Washington Post, one of the sponsors, cites all the time, and I will show you I was at 2%. I was tied with Pawlenty when he was still in the race, tied with John Huntsman, former governor, and ahead of Rick Santorum and ahead of Gary Johnson, a former governor. So, let me in. I think I would add a great new dimension to the debates. I think I would talk about, moderating. I'll tell you one thing, and I'm going to be releasing a commercial on Monday, which is kind of what if Fred had been in that last debate in Florida when that soldier, that courageous Stephen Hill, stood there from Iraq and asked about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, the Rick Santorum. Well, when that audience booed, I would have interrupted, and I'm going to kind of show a reenactment of what that would have been like, because no one on that stage, not one of those 11 Republicans, chastised that audience for booing an American soldier. And so, that's why I need to be in there, particularly when they're talking about social issues that affect an entire number of Americans personally, and then, half the country, 56%, supports gay marriage. There's no one defending gay marriage. And so I want to be up on that stage. So your listeners can go to fredkarger.com. They can contact the debate organizers. The Tuesday debate is Bloomberg Business Channel and also the Washington Post, and say, let Fred in. And that is a message we're taking. I hope to be in Iowa. You got a couple debates coming up this fall. I've been, treated so well by the Register and at Iowa City and all over the state, and I really hope to be in those debates and get a little different viewpoint out from the Republican Party, much more of a centrist, moderate view, which is missing.